classes. Yeah. We'll have a few more people from the team coming. I'm assuming it is recording and I just start talking. I spent yesterday, I did the whole sinus wash thing and cleared myself out, and then went and helped Greg with his books. So he's got 1 week to move in and about 6 weeks of work to be done. So yeah, anyway. But we'll have to catch up soon. I'll check if he's free on the 16th, but if not, so yeah. Do you want to start?
Let's give it a minute.
Okay. We'll just give everyone 1 more minute and then we'll get underway, okay? Yes, well...
Yeah, no, all good.
Because Greg's got plans to do something bigger.
Yes, you just might hear Brian go, ka-ching!
Yeah, and that's exactly what he said. I mean, hey. No, I went, yeah. Yeah. I think I'll get started. Okay, we'll get started. Thanks everyone for coming. For those of you who don't know me in person, I'm Kylie Ebert. You probably would have seen emails, talked to me on Zoom or things. I am recovering. It's not COVID, don't anyone panic. But yeah, I'm glad to be here today and for us to have this session. We are recording it, we are streaming it. It's a really great session that we need to have for all of the careers and employment team, also all of PACE and employability. And I'm very grateful that some of our PACE unit conveners and academic colleagues have come today to talk about this. It's something that in all of our dealings, we have issues that come up with students where we're concerned about them, we want to do the right thing by them, we're not maybe exactly sure what to do, and certainly as we've found this session in our PACE units when we've checked in with students, there have been matters that have come up and things we need to deal with. So what we thought would be best that we share all this information and we hear from Penny. Penny Houseman's the head of student wellbeing. Their team has been through a lot of change in the last 12 months or so as well, but really helpful for us to hear from Penny how their team is set up, but also to run us through a few scenarios that should be really helpful when we're engaging with students, to know where the line is, to know how to be supportive, to know where the students can be directed to get the help that they might need, and to really, help them get the most out of their studies and stay on track, because that's ultimately what all our goal is. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Penny, and thank you for being here.
All right. Thanks, Kylie. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Great. So now I'm going to take my glasses off because there's a bright light and all you'll see is my sparkly glasses, but I can't actually see you unless I have my glasses on. So I imagine they'll be on and off. What I thought would be useful today is to start with giving you some information about the services that we have at Wellbeing, but also how we deliver our services, because that helps you in terms of giving information to students about what they can expect. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about reporting for support for students, so information that's useful for you in terms of understanding how you can link students to the supports we offer. And then finally, I thought, hoping that we've got time, of course we can have questions, but I've also got some scenario to ask you to have a think about how you would respond or what you might do given the information that I've presented. All right, so I just want to start with an acknowledgement of country. So today we're on the lands of the Wallamadigal people of the Darug Nation, unceded lands, and these are the lands that we work, study and enjoy ourselves on. So I'd like to recognise their continuing connections to land, water and community. I'd also like to pay my deep respects to elders past, present and future, and extend my respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who might be here today with us. Okay, so student wellbeing. Best way to think about student wellbeing is that it is a house. It's a house with rooms, but it also has a front door and it has a hallway. So I'm going to start by talking about the rooms. I've got my sort of real estate agent's hat on. What sort of services we offer in wellbeing. So we have four main services that we offer to students. The first and probably the best known service is the counselling and psychology service. Now, our counselling service is staffed by psychologists and clinical psychologists, and we offer 6 sessions with a registered psychologist. We offer group programs with psychologists, but we also offer some other approaches to really try and make sure that students who are not able, for instance, to come to appointments can still access some sort of psychological therapy and support. So, for instance, we have self-paced cognitive behavioural therapy that students can register in, and they'll get a weekly phone call from one of our staff members as they do that. We have an accessibility team. These are 2 of the teams that you're most likely to have heard of or have had some contact with. The accessibility team assists students who have a disability or a health condition that impacts their study. So, of course, many of us, myself included, have a disability or a health condition that has a very minimal impact on my ability to study when I was a student. So I was not needing to access this kind of service. But for students who do find that there are impacts, this service will help in terms of understanding what the impacts can be and then putting in place adjustments to study. And for you folks here, those adjustments can also relate to things like placements or internships. And conditions that our staff in accessibility are knowledgeable about, have a lot of experience working with include ADHD, ADD, autism spectrum, hearing, physical or vision impacts, learning disorders of different types, medical illness, mental illness, neurological conditions and temporary disability. So where someone, for instance, might have injured their wrist or injured a knee, they can't write, they can't get around campus easily for a few weeks. The third service that we have at Student Wellbeing is called Welfare. Welfare service assists mainly with more what you could call social or contextual issues. So the issues that it focuses on supporting students with include financial problems, financial hardship, legal problems, so assistance understanding things like fines, tenancy and rental issues, and other kinds of concerns that can arise that might impact a student's ability to study. And of course, we're not a legal service, we don't give legal advice, but we will link students up to low cost or no cost legal advice. Our team also offers now support with safety, and this is a relatively new service in terms of what we do. So we work with students who are affected by different types of student safety concerns that can include things like bullying, harassment, sexual harassment and sexual assault, relationship or domestic violence, and stalking. And of course, just flagging too that increasingly what we see is it's not only in our physical environment that students can experience safety concerns, but also in an online environment as well. So it's definitely something to be aware of. Okay, so that was the rooms, those are the services. Now I want to talk a little bit about how we do this, how we provide these services. So we have what we call our intake team. The main thing for you to remember is that essentially this is our front door. These are the people who you are most likely to speak to first, or a student is most likely to speak to first. And what we're really focusing on here is understanding in broad terms what the student is experiencing. The intake team provide information, they educate in terms of next steps, they direct to supports, either internal at the university or external, and also direct to our next level of service, which is assessment. So they're very much focused on responding to a high volume of contacts, because we do get contacts from students about a really, really wide range of issues. And the questions they're fundamentally going to look at are things like, is there a service need here? Or is this something that the student might be able to, with some guidance, address themselves? Do we feel like there's a risk element to what's happening? So perhaps because of their mental state, because of their academic standing, things like homelessness or relationship violence. Where we think there's a risk element, that means a person needs to talk to our next level of service. And finally, a very common reason for students contacting us, is there a need for information or documentation in relation to some application that the student might have. So that team responds to something of the order of 1,000 to 2,000 emails per month, and we also get around 650 online requests per month. Obviously, the numbers will go up and down depending on the time of year. But as I said, you can start to get a sense for that this is quite a high volume coming through our door. We also obviously, this team responds to phone calls and people who just walk in to find out more from our reception. Okay, then our next area of service, as I said, we call this the assessment and triage team, but the easiest way to think about it is this is our hallway. So the staff working in this team look very broadly at mental health, welfare support and safety domains. So they're really trying to understand what's happening for a student that's brought them to contact us. So they will collaborate with students to really understand holistically what's happening and to develop plans to take around next steps, what's going to be helpful to do in relation to what's happening. Where needed, they'll talk to subject matter experts, either within our service or sometimes outside our service, and refer if that's needed. We'll also, at that level, for instance, provide assisted referral to GPs. So key focus is understanding what's going on, planning, and then making sure the student understands and feels that the plan is actually going to be something that's workable for them. So discussing what the options are in terms of what we offer internally or what might be available externally at the uni or outside the uni, and whether these actually are going to meet the students' needs. And then implement, so work with the student, do a bit of follow-up and coaching in terms of, for instance, if there's been a barrier to some of the steps that have been identified, how might we sort of address that, so that the student actually feels like they've got a bit of assistance in terms of taking those next steps. Everyone who works in this team is either a psychologist, a new psychologist, so they have a lot of supervision from our more experienced workers, or we have mental health nurses, social workers, so it's quite a multidisciplinary team working in this area. The other service that it's worth knowing about that they offer is what is called a triage. For what to remember is that this is a same-day appointment. So if a student comes with a concern that just can't wait to you or to our staff, it's for you to know that absolutely Monday to Friday between about 9 and 4:30 we will always have capacity to see that student and have a chat to them. So it's just, I think, worth knowing that that is available and that is there. So those two services, obviously they've got a pretty broad focus, but mainly a lot of mental health, psychosocial support through those two layers of our service. In terms of the accessibility service, so the service that offers adjustments to study, to placements, this is just to give you a bit of an understanding. Again, we see broadly the same steps of assess, so understand what's going on for the student, what's impacting their study, develop a plan in terms of how to address that, and then get the plan actually implemented and get the plan going. So students here do need to provide us with some support documentation from a health practitioner that confirms that there is disability or a health condition, and gives us some information about what the impacts on study might be. They then meet and talk to the staff and get that really more detailed understanding of how study gets impacted, and then go through a process of suggesting and discussing adjustments that can be put in place with study. And once those adjustments have been agreed, this team will then work with unit conveners, academic staff, with administrative staff in departments and faculties to actually put in place those adjustments. And the team will also work with practicum, placement supervisors, and so on in terms of how adjustments can actually be implemented. And we've got a little screenshot there of the front online page that students can use if they do want to register with the service. The other thing that this service offers for students is group programs called skill shops that focus on, they follow the student life cycle through the session and really focus on what students might need some support or help or strategies with at that time of session. So obviously start of session, it might be getting to know others, getting your head around your timetable and your organisation, and then as session goes on, being organised in terms of things like your assessments. By the end of session, it's often more around managing stress and time so that you can manage the volume of assessments or final exams. So those skill shops do run every session. And currently we have about 2,800 students registered with that service. Okay, so those are our services that offer an individual student contact. We also have broadened our reach to try and offer more on-demand or services available to digital mental health services. Two that it's worth knowing about that we offer. One is Talk Campus. This is an online peer support community that students can access through either an app on their phone or through a link on the web. Support is available from trained peer support workers. They can use up to 12 or more languages, and it's available any time of day, anywhere in the world. So for some students who prefer not to come and see face-to-face appointments, who might be located offshore, outside of Sydney or whatever, this can be quite a good low-effort option in terms of supporting mental well-being. And also it has really robust safety monitoring and response in place, which is why we opted to go with this particular platform. The other digital mental health and wellbeing support that we offer is through the Macquarie Wellbeing app. Staff can also access and download the app on their phones. And what we have through there is a news feed in terms of events, different types of events on campus. So we regularly promote careers, events, because they are really essential for some of our students, that sense in terms of they understand what they're working towards and why they're working towards it. It's a key part of wellbeing. So we take a pretty broad approach, but again, quite a useful one for yourself in terms of knowing potentially what is being promoted to support student wellbeing. It's useful for you to know. You can contact us and we will put things up through the feed on the app. And it also has content, podcasts, at the moment very much mental wellbeing focused, but in the new year we're hoping to broaden that a bit further again. Content around managing finances and really trying to promote the sort of healthy behaviour that supports people's wellbeing generally. Okay. So that is sort of a bit of an overview in terms of services. Does anyone have any questions at this point about services, how we work, or I will keep going? Yep. All good? Okay. So next section is really focused on reporting to access support. You've met with a student, you've had contact with a student, you're concerned about them. What are some next steps? Most importantly, to know if a situation is urgent or an emergency. How do you tell if it's urgent or emergency? If you need someone to come to you right now, that's urgent or an emergency. We do sometimes get calls to wellbeing reception saying, I'm with a student, I can't leave them. Can someone come over? If that's your situation, call campus security. They are best placed to help you. The reason I say that is campus security are trained first aiders and they can coordinate whatever other services need to come and help. Wellbeing, our staff are not all first aiders. We don't have the crucial walkie-talkie. We can't play that coordination role. So if you're ever on campus and you think, I need help with something now, please contact campus security. Use the 9999 number, use one of the blue help points that are on the main circulation around campus. But really important takeaway message is to contact security. If you need urgent assistance for a student who's off campus, then emergency services is your best point of contact. Again, getting someone to the location where the student is who can assess and put in place those next steps is the most helpful thing you can do right in the moment when the situation arises. Now we have sort of step 2. What do you do when you want to get in contact about a student where you have some concerns about their student wellbeing? It may well be that there was an emergency situation with that student and you called campus security and things happened, and now you're thinking, well, I'd like to get some follow-up for that student, maybe for some of their friends or peers, you know, a whole range of reasons. The best way to ask for that follow-up is to lodge a care report on the website. So what happens when you do lodge a report? That team, those teams that I talked about, the intake and assessment team, will look at what's come through. They will follow up on every report as best they can. Yeah.
I've just got a question.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had so many suicidal students that I've had in the last 12 to 18 months. I don't know what other people are finding, but I've had a bunch. And so constantly we put a lot of care reports in. And of course we don't know what happens once we put it in because confidentiality says you can't tell us what you're doing. If somebody is suicidal and we're very concerned for their safety, what do you do beyond 2 attempts to phone and send an email? Like, do you then, if they don't respond to the email, because often we've tried to contact them and they're not responding, what do you do to ensure their safety beyond that?
So if you've provided us with information in relation to the suicidal risk, generally, you know, someone will call you back to say, tell me more about what's going on here. In that case, that's an approach we will hand over to a local mental health team where we think, okay, we need, again, someone to go to where the student is to follow up in terms of this situation.
So you get the mental health crisis team involved?
We would follow up with the local mental health team. That's right, yeah. Because the best way to think about the service that we offer here is that we are the GP service. So we're not the ambulance, we're not emergency, and we're not the heart specialist either, you know. So we can link into those other things that are needed, but we also recognise when we don't have the expertise or the ability to operate in certain ways, how to reach into those services that can then operate in certain ways. Yeah. So the sort of situation you're talking about there, we'd be saying, we've made our 2 attempts, student hasn't responded, we're still really concerned, we've still got more reports about other people's concern, so we need to hand this over to someone who can be more assertive than we're able to be in terms of following up with the student. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah.
I mean, to be completely honest, the mental health crisis team is so overwhelmed and understaffed, and it's so difficult to get them to come to a crisis. You know, I'm not too sure how that works on the ground.
Yeah.
You know, as a psychologist, we have great little trouble getting the mental health crisis team to respond. But
yeah, I suppose.
I'm assuming that because you're at university, maybe you have a contact in the team or something.
Yeah, we do. So the question just is around how do you activate emergency mental health care. We do work really hard to maintain relationships around services, of course, particularly in our area, but externally as well. It's one of the reasons we have a multidisciplinary team, and also many of the people who work with us have worked with New South Wales Health in the past in those teams. So yeah, it is something that we work hard to do to be able, so that when we go to a team to say we are really concerned, they're not going to push back at us. They're like, okay, we trust your assessment is an assessment that we need to follow up on. Yeah. That doesn't always mean there isn't a bit of an arm wrestle, but we will, you know, generally really push a referral. Yeah. But what that also means is if you're continuing to have concerns about a student, make another report, okay? Because if we've tried to get in contact, sometimes we'll talk to people, things seem okay. Risk changes, it changes really quickly. If what you're seeing is different, you need to please let us know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so as I said, we can assist you to support a student. You're not alone in having to do that. However, as I think is Wayne, just pointed out, we're not always able to share a lot of information with you about what's happening for the student, what the next steps are because of privacy and confidentiality. So if a student doesn't give us permission to share that information, we're only able to share information with limited people in limited circumstances. Okay, so I know sometimes that is a source of frustration, but it's also why I say if you continue to have concerns, continue to let us know. It's one of the reasons we have this system. It enables us to get a really good sense of what's happening for a student. The other area of reporting for support to know about is where a student is affected by inappropriate or unwanted behaviour. Now that might be that the student is the target, or sometimes it's also that the student is doing the behaviour that's inappropriate or unwanted. But if you have concerns about a student in that kind of situation, this is a way that you can flag those concerns with us. So our initial focus here is on supporting those who are impacted. Now, depending on the situation, and as I said, we see everything from mild online name-calling to really serious relationship violence. It's a big spectrum, but our initial focus is on supporting those impacted, making sure that people are safe, making sure that we've got something in place so they can continue with study if they wish. They've got access to supports, housing and so on that they may need. We do also accept anonymous reports in this space. So when we get an anonymous report, again, it's often useful. We may not be able to do a lot, but again, if we've had a whole run of reports in relation to a particular situation, that threshold can shift. Because it's such a big spectrum, it's of what situations that we see here, it is hard for me to give you any kind of firm kind of steps in terms of what happens next. Our response and the information that we can share really does depend on the situation, but it's quite probable that a few of you here may have had some contact with student wellbeing staff around inappropriate, unwanted behaviour and responding to that. Reports are also really helpful in that they do help us track concerns and get a holistic overview of what might be happening both generally on campus. If we start to suddenly see a whole lot of online behaviour concerns coming through, we know that we might need to go out, particularly to certain areas, do some education with students about what's appropriate for online behaviour and what isn't. We might need to do some education for staff about how they can respond to online behaviour. So we can do that more general response as well as the specific response around individuals and the situation. And one thing I want to just really underline here is we first started doing this in 2018. We now have a lot of experience in this space and a lot of understanding of what our options are, when the university has actually the power to do certain things versus when it doesn't, and what formal and informal type responses might look like. So if you're experiencing something with a student in relation to this kind of behaviour, it's a good idea to have a chat to us first in regards to what the options are for responding. Okay. Yeah, so what you can do, Margot, is just put in a report saying, hi, it's Margot. I've got this happening. I don't really want to identify anyone, but can someone give me a call about what should happen next? You can add details later. Correct. That's right. That's right. And then if we go back to you and you say, when we say, Margot, that's really interesting because we've got, 5 other reports about students who went to that function. We need to see what happened or involved in that student group or whatever. It just, once we were really trying to go on anecdote and gossip in this space, now we actually have just that much better sense of, oh no, we are seeing quite a bit coming from this area. We need to kind of step up in terms of what we're doing. Yeah. So generally everything, now if you put it in at 5 p.m, no. If you wanted to talk to someone outside business hours, use our 1-800 number, okay? That's always an option to have a chat to. Generally, we look at everything. We do then do a bit of a prioritisation. So if we see something which we think is highly concerning, someone will get a response generally within a business day. If it's less concerning, it might be up to 3 days. Yeah. In this space, in terms of inappropriate, unwanted behaviour. For care reporting, generally, again, we do a prioritisation. So highly concerning will go more quickly, and that at peak times that can be up to 5 days for a less concerning report. Yeah. Yeah. So, but look, and I mean, I think I'd say there are times in the session when we do get extremely busy. So if you have a high level of concern, by all means, make a report. And if you get to a point where you think, I want to just check in here, it's fine to just leave a message at reception saying, can someone give me a call back about my report? That's okay. Does anyone have any questions? Other questions so far? No? Okay. So I thought now we get to the perhaps more interesting part, some scenarios. These are not based on exact situations, but they are based on elements of quite common situations that we see. There's not necessarily a perfect answer here, but they're designed to just kind of make you think about, what would I do if this situation, came across my area? How might I respond? And thinking about what I've just presented, how could the services at Wellbeing maybe help me here? So, the first scenario. A student emails you about their group work project. The student states they're doing all the work for the project, they think they should get more marks. The student writes that of the 2 other students, one is constantly late or doesn't turn up to meetings because of work commitments, and the other student makes no effort. What do you think your next steps might be? Anyone met this kind of situation before? Yes. Navigating people's different expectations is always tricky. Yeah. 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 So that's great. I think having a discussion about this is the situation, what should I do? One thing I'd say is often with these kind of situations we move very fast into wanting to investigate and understand what's going on. And it's really important to remember a good first step is, are there support needs for the people involved here? So you think about the 3 students involved here. One thinks they're doing everything. One is not coming because of work commitments, and the other one seems to be missing in action. What are the support needs for each of those 3 students, do you think? Yeah. Yeah. Because we've got some signs that maybe one student might be experiencing financial stress. They're prioritising their work over their study. And we've got another sign that maybe the other student has got some problems with their motivation, their engagement. Now, there could be any number of reasons why that is, we don't know. But you might think, okay, let's check that out. And then for our student who's feeling aggrieved as well, checking out that with them, you know, might be useful. Do you feel like, notwithstanding this, you're going okay? Do we need to check in relation to their expectations around how others will work with them? So it's useful, I think. We absolutely do at a certain point want to get to the stage of what's happening in a sort of more investigatory way of thinking. But it's also useful to back up and think, well, there's 3 people in here. We've got 3 different sets of perceptions about what's going on, and maybe some differences in terms of where some support might be helpful. Yeah.
I think it's the really key part is that when you receive a report, it's never just about one person. There's a whole set of circumstances that can be quite complex and interacting. And I think that since, I was involved in the implementation of this system, those sorts of things come out. And hopefully they lead to you having some clarifying conversations and that it's a real learning moment, referring some students to some resources. But sometimes this is the tip of the iceberg, and it is that, someone's got major financial food security issues, they're homeless, whatever it might be. This warrants further attention and a much broader perspective.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to move on to the next scenario. So a placement supervisor approaches you about the behaviour of a student. The student emails the supervisor several times per day with questions about the placement. The supervisor says that when they don't respond within the hour of receiving an email, the student emails again to check that they have received the email. You realise that this student recently attended a consultation session with you, staying for a half an hour after the session, and wanted to go through a draft of their replacement report in detail. So what might your next steps be here, do you think? Sure, go for it.
I guess you just first of all follow up with them. I think it's the first point of call, like what's going on, how you feeling, that sort of stuff. And then afterwards I'd probably question, do you have any support outside of what's going on right now? Are people on the uni side aware of what's going on right now? Once you have that sort of information, sort of better triage where to put them or where to refer them on to. There's nothing you can really do if they do have a mental illness except provide them the support they need and the understanding. It's just sort of about working with them going forward. And it's about placement, so they should already have their placement supervisor in place, and you should make sure they're aware, and they should put that on the chain. But yeah, on your end, just stick with them until you know that they have the right supports, because that's obviously a bit either anxiety, mental illness, obsessive compulsive, something like that. So,
Yeah. What do you...
I think it's a bit good to know with these at what point we hand that over, because that person might be anxious about something, so they're probably not going to give me a response to everything now, and feel that they need the help. Is that something we just put in a care report for, and then sort of okay, tell the person to get a response back, and maybe check in with you later on to see how they're going, so you still have the supervisor?
Yeah. Do you get... I think always a good question with these ones can be, is there likely to be an impact on the student's academic performance in this placement? You know, is it going to have an impact on the experience of the placement? That's often a good first question, because if the answer is yes, you'd probably want to be a bit more active in terms of linking the student in with some help. So one absolutely fine approach can be just to contact the student and say, look, how are you well, talk to the supervisor, say, okay, I understand you're concerned. Are you okay if I've just flagged this with the student that we've had a discussion? So get that permission to share the information with the student, because no one likes to feel like people are talking about them behind their back. And it's going to be much easier for you if you can then say to the student, look, we're a bit concerned about how you're going. You do seem really, at times from our point of view, you know, you're seeming quite anxious with how you're going. But it's much easier to have that conversation if you can say, you know, this is we're not saying this because we're nasty people. We're saying this because we're concerned about you. And what we would like to do is to just make sure that you can have a chat to someone at Wellbeing about what could potentially help out there. Yeah, I can see another hand there. Yeah, I think generally, as I said, we would all like to have the sense that if there were concerns about how something was running, that they came from good intention, that we were aware of them, that we had a sense of what was going to happen next. That said, there's no sense here where, you know, this isn't a situation where you are going to be perhaps highly alarmed. If you're highly concerned, you may not have the luxury of time here. You might want to just put in a care report saying, I'm not identifying the student, but this is the situation. Can someone give me a ring to have a chat about how we should approach this? Yeah, that would be fine also as an approach. Yeah.
I think this is something that we all need to be okay with, the are you okay conversations, okay? And often they need to be started in a less formal way, okay? So that care, that concern, that are you okay conversation is always a great starting point, okay? If we start to make it really formal really quickly, we can take it in directions we don't want. But backing it up with this care report means that we don't have to make the call about is it reflective of something more serious. Hopefully the student wellbeing team could then follow up on that, and hopefully they can join the dots, because it might be happening in every single unit that the student's doing, and again we just have quite a narrow field of vision in this instance. But you know, the are you okay conversation is something I think we all need to practice ourselves.
Yeah, and that's where, again, having a chat to someone at Wellbeing can help you in terms of feeling like, okay, I've got a sense of what I'm going to say, what I'm going to most likely recommend, and what will sort of happen next when I have that chat to the student. Yeah.
I'd probably also take it back a notch and check that the supervisor has laid out appropriate expectations for the student, because maybe the placement, and that there hasn't been a history of that sort of thing happening with other people in that placement.
Sure.
And not just assuming that the student's got the problem.
Yeah, yeah. I think, as I said, generally I'd suggest support is always step one, and then investigation is step two. So having a bit of a supportive discussion with the student about, is it going okay? Are there things that you're finding you're not understanding or you're not clear on? And then, yeah, it may become clear that perhaps expectations are unrealistic, are really high. But just keeping in mind, our first step here is to support, and then we might start later moving into a space of let's investigate a little bit the circumstances here. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a general comment. I mean, the term care report seems to imply a high bar for reporting. And I have to say that that's what I'm used to. Like, I generally say care report for students who are suicidal or having a very serious problem. But the feeling I'm getting today, right, is that the bar is a bit lower than that. So
The bar should be very low.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the point of
So
the
how do we get
system.
the word out there that,
Yeah.
that it's actually not,
Yeah.
the bar, because nearly everyone I know thinks the bar is here.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly right.
Until today, I probably thought the bar was about here.
Yeah.
And the bar's kind of out here.
It is
So
something we need to change because the thing is, well, with exception for you, most of us here aren't able to assess against that bar. We're not the professionals in making that judgment.
Yeah.
We also, as I have said repeatedly, have a very narrow field of vision in terms of the students holistically. And so since implementing this system, our number of reports has gone through the roof. And when I say our, I'm Penny now. I still feel an attachment to the team. But that's a good thing because we've got our finger on the pulse more. We can tell, and again, we're able to see what is the low level, less critical thing, but a bubbling along issue. The online behaviours has most definitely been something that has fed them, serious discussions and education with students about what is appropriate, what others might find offensive. But I really think the whole point of this system and the approach of the team is it's too much of a burden on you as an individual to make that call. If you're in doubt, just report it. The experts can look at the picture and make that call. They're the best place to do it. We just need to discharge our responsibility, our care and concern, by making that report. And yeah, I do agree that the lowering of the bar is very key. Even if it seems trivial to you, it might be the missing piece of a puzzle for Penny's team.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, campus security are using this system. Everybody, members of the public, can make reports as well. So it's just really, if you just see something that, oh God, hope that person's okay, that's really what it's there for, and that prioritisation then comes into play in Penny's team.
Thanks, Kylie. Yeah, look, I must say how long have we run this system? 2020 we implemented, didn't we? June 2020. We had a lot of caution that we were going to get, for instance, vexatious reports in the inappropriate, unwanted behaviour space, that we were going to be overwhelmed. We have had to change the way the service operates to make sure we have that front door and that hallway kind of component to absolutely look at what comes in and think what's going to work in terms of what we're seeing. But on balance, I think it's been really positive. We have been able to see things so much earlier than we ever, before you would only sort of twig, oh, this person has had issues with 5 different units, they're on academic suspension, and, they needed help in terms of a whole raft of managing adjustments to study, how much study they did. And you're trying to then unpick a tremendously complicated situation. If you'd known about it a year before, it might not have got to that point. So yeah, it creates a bit more work at this end, but it also reduces the work you see at the other end, which has way more impact on people, because by the time they've got to that point, things are really, really difficult. You're trying to put in withdrawals and get paperwork and all of that stuff. It's really, really tricky.
I think that the points out of that is this is part of being a community and looking out for each other and strengthening that sense of what it is to be here and be part of this community. But as you said, Penny, there's a whole network of people. So this is a way to get in that front door. And the triage happens to people within Penny's team, but also to other parts of the university. So if it's an advocacy matter or various things, it is that way to, allow that student to be referred to other areas, both inside and outside the university.
So one of the services that we introduced as a direct result of having this much more holistic, faster capacity in reporting is a case manager. The case manager works with some of our most complicated students to keep them in managing their study, understanding the administration on top of that, single point of contact. We've seen phenomenal outcomes from that with some very, very complicated people that in the past we've just, they would have walked away, we would have walked away kind of thing. So yes, it does stretch you, but I think it stretches you in a good way, Yeah, and I don't think it's not a reason not to report, is what I'd say. Yeah. All right, I'm going to get to the last scenario. A few weeks after a partner event, a student comes to talk to you. They state they accepted several LinkedIn invitations from people at the event. One staff member from a partner organisation now keeps messaging them, encouraging them to attend events that might be of interest, and then go for a drink or meal afterwards to discuss their career plans. The staff member has started following the student's Instagram account. The student was a bit surprised by that because they generally post more personal content like pictures of their holidays. The student says they spoke to a friend who did a placement at the partner organisation who reported a similar experience with the same staff member. What would your next steps be? Silence.
I just saw him just roll his eyes and shake his head. So there's a good start.
And I have to say, I'm sorry, the image is entirely stereotyped, but it was kind of the best I could find in terms of communicating the feeling. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny though, isn't it? How we can probably many of us can think of situations over the years where this kind of thing has started, and it's kind of like, okay, but this is a student, you've got some responsibility, what do you do next?
Now, if the student's feeling uncomfortable, depending on how uncomfortable they feel, they could either just block that person or they could give them a clear message that they don't feel comfortable with this, depending on the level. I mean, if they feel comfortable communicating with the partner to say they're not comfortable with that, that might be enough. But if they just feel that they're not in a safe space, it's easier to just block the person. But as an institution, we should be keeping some sort of record of this, particularly seeing it seems to have happened to someone else who may or may not have been at one of our students.
Yeah. It's a tricky one often with these because there's such a big power imbalance, So especially depending on what this student is doing for their study, there may not be many organisations where they are going to be able to find work. It's a bit like PhDs, HDR in that sense. There's often a few relationships that are really important, and thinking about what do I do with these is really, and so, sometimes students will be like, and I've just blocked them, and other times it really will be, well, I was really hoping to do some placement there or some work there, or, that's why I went. Yeah.
Is there anyone else at that organisation they could try and think with who they might feel more comfortable with?
Yeah. Maybe it's useful, I can give you, because we are getting close to time, I'll give you a sense of how we responded to this type of situation when we met it. And Kylie was involved in this kind of situation. So in that situation, which had some similarities but was not exactly the same,